over 7 million different animals inhabit our planet.
But king cobras are strictly Southeast Asia going into India.
Yes.
Yeah, up into China.
What can they teach us?
Interestingly enough, their venom is yielded a whole bunch of pain relievers, such as cobraxin and also...
Many species are in crisis and need your help. Join the movement at allcreaturespod.com.
Welcome to the All Creatures Podcast. This is Chris.
And I'm Angie.
So what animal are we doing this week? Because that's not something I would put with the king cobra at all.
I know, Chris. Oh my gosh. This is one of the many reasons why I love this podcast, of course, if I do say so myself, because every week these creatures are just full of so many surprises. And the king cobra is just an amazing snake, and we're going to learn a lot of fun facts about it today. And it blew me away when I learned that, of course, we know that most snakes hiss, right? Make a hissing vocalization. The king cobra is known to growl, and it makes that vocalization that I opened up with, that growling sound, which is just one of the many ways it's set apart from several other species of snake. And I just fell in love with it.
Right.
The physiology is just so incredible. The behavior. Oh my gosh, wait till we get the behavior. And so I had to open with it today, and it's super unique, right? I mean, it sounded like a bear or something, and it's not. It's the king cobra, which
is the king. It's the king.
The king, yeah. I mean, and it's just, we're gonna have a lot of fun today because it is, of course, a venomous species of snake, and it is the longest. Species
huge
of venomous snake. So it's and of course we'll talk a lot about the infamous hood that cobras are known to have, and just so much fun. And I got to live vicariously this week, doing all my research and watching a lot of videos of snake expert handlers and researchers and zookeepers, because I was lucky enough when I worked at the zoo to get to work with snakes. So that's where I fell in love with like ball pythons and of course the famous corn snake that everyone knows.
I know.
So cute. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But I was never cool enough to get to work with hot snakes, which in the industry is what we call venomous snakes, because it takes a lot of at accredited zoos, it takes a lot of certifications and practice and things like that. And I never was able to make it that far along. And so I just have a lot of respect for people that know how to handle them and understand their striking behavior and things like that. And as we'll find out through the podcast, is king cobra, although it has a powerful name, it's actually kind of shy in general.
I know.
So, which I know we talked about when we covered rattlesnakes too, is, they're really not trying to come bite you.
No,
you almost have to like step on them.
They don't.
But in the same instance, a lot of people fear them, and that's well understood. So
and persecuted a little bit.
Yeah. So we'll be talking about the science today and the facts, and maybe busting a couple myths here and there. And it's just so fun. It's going to be a good one.
Oh, and I mean, it's been forever since we've covered a reptile. And even longer since we've covered a snake. We've been neglecting these guys for a little bit, so it's good to be back. And for all of our herp friends, herpetology and herpetologists, herpers that are out there that are excited that we're covering another snake, and might as well go big and go for one that's so iconic. And they're, like Angie said, like, they're not a true cobra. Like, this is a fact that when I get to evolution, I'm like, what?
I know.
This is the king. This is the king.
That's
and it's not even
I love
a true
this
cobra,
pod, man.
So.
Yeah.
So they're amazing, and it's going to be a fun species to cover today. And just before we get there, thanks to our listeners. First we Melanie and Emily joined us on Patreon this week. Thank you both so much. We have seen some incredible growth these last few weeks, during everybody locked indoors, like 30-40%. Like, our downloads are insane. It's amazing.
It's I sent Chris a screenshot the other night. I'm like, holy macaroni, buddy.
Yeah, I know. We've grown huge. So thank you. Thanks to our new listeners that are catching on to the podcast, and those that are sharing our podcast. People that like Lee down in Australia, still sharing every week, and we just appreciate it. And thank you.
Yes, and if you could please do us a favor and rate and review us on iTunes, that'd be great. It's starting a new month, and I would love to have at least a couple glowing recommendations that makes our podcast be more present on some of the iTunes circulating podcast networks. So.
Yeah, no, thank you. It means the world to us. And, you're talking about behavior, Angie. I can't wait to talk about snake charmers. How do they do it? Looking at that behavior. And I think that's something we were going to talk about. So, stay tuned for that. But you did say this is the longest venomous snake in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It is huge.
And probably one of the most gorgeous.
Yes. But I mean, over 5 meters, 18 feet long. Like, that is insane.
Yeah, that's some of the longer ones. I think average is about 13 feet, but
still.
I mean, like two of you, but yes, still.
Yeah.
And usually about 20 pounds in weight. So that's a pretty fair amount for a snake to weigh. And in general, the males are the ones that are a little bit bigger because they have some sexual dimorphism going on compared to the females. So if a king cobra is reaching 18, or I think it was even up to like almost 19 feet, one in under human care was on record, that's going to be a male.
Yeah. Okay. And generally the coloration, yellow, brown, black, maybe green, right? Mm-hmm. And then they have those crossbars or chevrons.
Yeah, that was a new word that I learned, chevrons. I would have just thought of them as, I would have called them bands. I like the terminology of cream, yellowish, whitish, as you mentioned, crossbars, or I guess chevrons if you're in the industry, along its body. And the other thing too is that the juveniles are born jet black, and then their crossbars are super distinct. They're like this white, light yellow from the tail all the way up through the head. And as they grow and become more of adults, the bars, the chevrons can fade. And so I think some of the coloration patterns depend on the region that they're from too, is how prominent the chevrons or the crossbars stay into the adult's life. But they're just beautiful. And then, of course, with cobras in general, especially king cobras, they are known to engage in that upright behavior where they can lift a large couple feet, sometimes even more than a couple feet, top half of their body off the ground. And so you get to see their underside of their belly a lot when they're engaging some of the pre-striking behavior. And that will, you can see their hood, and then also, of course, these stripes that go along their belly that basically that are black and then yellow banded, basically.
Right.
So just really, really,
it's a
gorgeous
snake.
snake. Just a gorgeous snake, and on their heads they'll usually have a couple crossbars over the tops of their heads, and they have these beautiful, large, golden iris eyes. And of course, the hood is like oval shaped. And Chris will get into the physiology of the hood and how that enlarges when they are engaging in like either hunting or pre-striking behavior. But it's often olive green, and it's like smooth. And I think it's important too to mention that a lot of people think that snakes are slimy or sharp or icky, but the king cobra, that's definitely not the case. They have very, very round, cylindrical, smooth scales along their neck and body. So they just have this very uniform, beautiful, smooth appearance that to me makes them really appeasing to the eye.
Oh yeah, I think that's why they're one of the most iconic. That hood, and just that they're especially the king cobra, the big one. And you mentioned 20 pounds or 9 kilograms in weight, but their fangs are pretty big too, being one of the largest venomous snakes in the world or longest. And they can be up to half an inch or up to 10 millimeters long. So, we'll talk a little bit about their venom and striking. But again, like Angie said, these snakes are shy, and we go back to, like I said, it's been so long since we've covered a snake, the Eastern Diamondback over 100 pods ago. So we'll revisit them again because there's so many cool snakes in the world. But again, generally snakes, like we go back to that episode, still remember it to this day. They're very shy. It's most of the snake bites I know, especially with rattlesnakes in the United States or in North America, are because people are messing with them.
Sure.
People are picking them up, or it's very rare to come across them and then, them striking unless they have a reason to.
Yeah. And the way that I describe it is that in general, snakes are way more scared of you than you are of them. And I remember growing up, and one of my girlfriend's moms always told us when we were probably in middle school and starting to have crushes on boys or whatever, she was like, "Oh, girls, just remember that boys are like snakes in the grass. They're way more afraid of you than you are of them."
It's true at that age.
Yeah,
it's
at that
way
age.
True.
Definitely true. And so, and so I think we just have to keep that in mind. And now, depending on where you live, if you live in an area where there are venomous snakes, then yes, you need to be a little bit more careful. I grew up in Michigan. Historically, there used to be rattlesnakes in southwestern Michigan, but unfortunately, they've been pretty much eradicated in the area. So growing up, I didn't have to worry about any venomous snakes. And so therefore I probably stuck my hands, head, body, leg parts into things I, shouldn't have. And so now that I'm raising my boys in central
Florida. Yeah.
In Florida, we of course have a couple venomous snakes here. And I just teach them to always use common sense and to not put their heads, hands, body parts in places without really inspecting it first. And I think that's just a good life lesson in general. But when we're out in nature a lot. And so we, if we're looking in logs or under piles or leaves or whatever it is, we're making sure that we, either investigate it first gently with a long stick or making noise to let animals know that we are around. And so, some of it's you have behavior and you have to be careful and respect things. But that doesn't mean that we live in fear and we don't go on these amazing hikes or things like that, because we haven't even seen one. I hear all the time, there's coral snakes in our neighborhood. And I'm like, where? Yes, I want to see one.
Oh, yeah.
But we haven't. I've caught along the road. I've crossed a couple sunbathing, a couple rattlesnakes, and I think cottonmouth sunbathing. And so we stay at close distance, and I just try to hopefully get them off the road. Of like, okay, go, go.
Yeah, go do your thing. Go do your thing. Yeah, my sister was just clearing a woodpile the other day outside. She lives outside Atlanta. And there was a snake in there. She couldn't tell what type it was, but she's smart. She in the movie industry, they have snake handlers on set when they're out filming. They have snake wranglers that go around the set to make sure there aren't any snakes, and they look, and if they do, they relocate them. So just got to be aware where you are and where King Cobras are, not in Florida. And I even thought, before I did this episode, I knew they were from Asia, but I thought, how many cobras bleed into Africa? You'll find out, this isn't a true cobra, so that's where the true cobras are. But king cobras are strictly Southeast Asia going into India.
Yes.
Up into China, down into Indonesia and the Philippines. So that's their stronghold. That is where they're from.
Which was, like I said, too, without knowing my cobra geography and really knowing the different species intimately, I thought that was a really fun fact.
Yeah. And, I knew in India, they were a big deal in India.
I knew India, yes. I didn't know about some of the other places in Asia.
Yeah, and the Philippines, I didn't know they had Philippines there. And so, their habitat, dense open forests, near water, mangrove swamps, they like humidity, temperature. They'll actually spend a lot of time, almost a quarter of their time, up in trees.
Right, Chris. I
know.
I was reading. I'm like, and they, they're good climbers, and And they're not really known to be an aquatic swimming snake, but they can swim, and they have been reported doing that as well. So yeah, no, just really, really mobile and snake that can adapt to various habitats, but prefers to hide in general.
Yeah. It doesn't want to be messed with at all. Now, again, one of the things I've been doing lately is like kind of highlighting these habitats, and I found some surprising stuff about Southeast Asia. I know we've done quite a few species there, especially, tigers. We've been doing a lot of stuff on tigers lately, orangutans. Then we did gibbons. We did the giant squirrel in India.
Oh,
So
the
we've done
Technicolor squirrel. That was a fun one.
yeah, that was amazing. So it's really rich in biodiversity. I mean, we know that the tropical forest down there, I didn't realize how diverse it was. So, they say Southeast Asia contains some of the most biodiverse in tropical forests on Earth. So they have, here we go, compared to other tropical forests, they have the most birds, they have the most mammal species.
Wow.
And I have the second highest proportion of vascular plant species, almost 25%. Come from Southeast Asia compared to other tropical regions on Earth,
like the Amazon.
Okay, very diverse. Mm-hmm. And we think of the Amazon as incredibly diverse, but the tropical forest of this region of the world is actually more diverse. And a lot of it they talk about is, reading up on this is, way back then we talked a lot about how ocean levels rise and fell over the ice age and other things like that, like the Komodo dragon. Mm-hmm. We talked about the Komodo dragon originated in Australia, and then when sea levels dropped due to the freezing, polar caps, things like that, that's when they went to Komodo Island and those other islands. And then when the water came back, they got trapped there and they went extinct in Australia and stayed on these islands. Anyways, there was a lot of gene flow, I guess, a lot of biodiversity going on during those time points. Now, question for you, Angie.
Have I been to the region? No. Is it on my bucket list? Yes.
I know.
Can somebody over there host us? Please.
Well, I'm looking specifically at the biodiversity or the forest, right? So I came up with reading this paper that I'm going to talk about here in a second. It was talking about where the world's forests are. And I thought, I bet you, I wonder if Angie knows this. So for the continent, even the total forest cover will surprise you, I think. But just look at each continent, the percent of land cover that is forest, whether it's tropical, boreal, whatever.
Deciduous.
Which one do you think is number one? Which of all the continents, has the most forest cover percentage for the total continent?
I love this game, first and foremost. Mm-hmm. I just did a fun Zoom trivia the other night, and my girlfriend and I, we totally came in first, and then we did a conservative bet for the final answer. Because I figured all the dude groups would bet it all and then lose. And
well, people could use this. They could use this. This will surprise you. Okay.
Yeah. So
I think the data's surprising. That's why I included it.
I think just off the top of my head, I would have to say Asia. It's so big, and obviously that's the area where folk. No,
you think Asia is huge, and this is percent land cover. So
right, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what type of trees. Like, it doesn't have to be tropical. It can be coniferous or.
Here's the thing about Asia, and I love talking about Asia because, especially Mongolia, and Asia is an ocean of grass. Like I've said that before. It literally is an ocean size of savanna grass.
Yeah, okay.
And then Siberia. So it does have a lot of forests, but Asia, only 19% of land cover. It's actually last place.
Oh,
in this list of all continents.
All right. Okay. Good to know.
So dense forests, lot for the whole continent.
For the whole continent. So my next guess would probably be either North America on the coniferous side or South America on the tropical side.
Okay. So it is South America's number one.
All right, my third choice. Woohoo!
Yes. Okay, but think of Central United States. What is Central United States? Nothing but plains, right?
Right.
The plains.
Right.
No trees.
Yeah, I was thinking more of like Canada, that
right.
area.
So per percent of total continent size, South America, 49% is forests.
Wow.
Which
okay.
is huge. Okay.
Huge.
This is 2000. This is a year in 2000. This is from the FAO, United Nations. 864 million hectares is South America, forest, right? Asia, 19%, but that's Southeast, that's where we're getting to, Southeast Asia. That's where I'm
Sure.
focused
Mhm.
on. That's where a lot of the forests are. You would guess who's number 2? It will surprise you. And it's got actually the most, it's over 1 billion hectares of forest. It will blow you away. Number 2.
Well, that hint makes me think that it's one I like Australia
Yeah.
that I wouldn't think of at all.
No, Australia's not even on here. I think Australia is 0 or 2%.
Okay.
Europe.
Okay, that was going to be my next one. I was
Europe.
Yeah. Okay.
I didn't even think that. Europe,
Yeah.
45% of Europe is forests.
Go Europe.
So
Go Europe.
I
go.
know,
Go
but
Europe.
you think
go
about
Europe, go.
Eastern Europe and Germany and
Yeah,
France.
I just thought it was
yeah.
like, yeah, huh. Okay.
Okay. Anyways, so I just thought the data was fascinating. That
We love our
South
numbers
America,
on this podcast.
Yeah, I know.
Big fan of numbers.
And Africa. Okay, Africa. 23% of Africa is forest, but it's actually number 1 in forest loss. 10% loss in 10 years from 2000 to 2010.
Higher than South America or Indonesia?
South America is right behind it with 9%. Yeah.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah. Asia is actually positive, but it's again that you're talking those boreal forests. Now, the reason I bring that up, because looking at the data, trying to understand Southeast Asia, is out of all the tropical regions on Earth, Southeast Asia has the highest deforestation rate.
Oh, gotcha.
So even though Asia has a net positive, I mean, I think that a lot of that's like Russia and them planting trees or whatever.
There's a big campaign to plant trees.
Right. Not in Southeast Asia, where
Gotcha.
the tropical forest is actually it's actually degrading faster than anywhere else.
And that's
on Earth.
where the main diversity is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's where our King Cobras are. So it's really, so I looked at a paper. It was the State and Conservation of Southeast Asian Biodiversity. So this paper is looking at not only the deforestation rate, but it actually has the highest proportion, Southeast Asia, the highest proportion of threatened species across all taxonomic, across all groups of things. I can't say taxonomy. So between plants, reptiles, birds, mammals, they have the highest loss of biodiversity. The only exception was amphibians. So
Wow.
Southeast Asia, this is surprising to me.
Yeah.
I know they're in trouble.
Right.
I know there's a lot of problems going there. I didn't realize it was that bad. Like Madagascar, bad.
Yeah, I
You
didn't
know, we
either.
go back and we covered lemurs.
I mean, I guess I know, like with the palm oil, with orangutans, and we're still trying to get an expert on here to talk about that. But yeah, I wouldn't have put it on par, like you said, with
That's
Madagascar.
good. That's where I was going with this. That's great. Yeah, you're right on target. I mean, not only rice production, but palm oil is one of the big ones. So there's a group called the Union of Concerned Scientists that started in the 1960s out of MIT, which is basically where the smartest people in the universe live.
I know.
Or at least on Earth.
Well, I think did I tell you I was a guest lecturer or discussion group leader there last week.
No way. Oh,
Yeah.
at MIT? Oh my God, Angie.
Yeah.
See, on our podcast, we have one of the smartest humans on Earth that helps in the podcast. Thank you, Angie.
Yeah, well, it was a little bit, a lot of life is not what you know, it's who you know. My sister-in-law is a professor there, but I will still take it where I can get it, right? And it was fun. It was a good discussion. And I think with everything you do in life, I had a lot of fun, but I also learned how I can improve it next time. And of course, doing things in this now social distancing kind of virtual world that we're living in, it's not as easy to do a guest lecture as it is when you're obviously in person, right?
Yeah.
So but I think it went well, and
hey, when you have the smartest people on Earth wanting to talk to you, Angie, you're in that group. You're in that group.
I'll take it. It was fun.
All right. So the UCS, this group of concerned scientists that started many, many, many years ago and still going, there's really 4 commodities that are responsible for deforestation of our tropical forests. So we talk about palm oil. which Angie just mentioned. Wood products, we've mentioned before on this podcast. Soy, growing lots of soy. Soy is it's a source of protein, cheap
Hey,
source of
I
protein.
remember soy. Yeah, my whole dissertation.
Yeah, I know. That was Angie's whole PhD.
Phytoestrogens, yeah.
Yeah, forever. Oh, man, you did such a good job on that. And then beef. So those are the 4 commodities. Beef, soy, palm oil, and wood products are the reason forests are being cut down across the planet. So that's the big thing. So the UCS estimates that each year we lose about the size of Switzerland. It's about 15,000 square miles or 38,000 square kilometers each year is lost. And it's just unsustainable. It's unsustainable. So we're seeing a lot of this in Southeast Asia. This is where the king cobra lives, amongst other species we've talked about. Quickly on palm oil, Angie's right. I mean, palm oil has exploded. It's in 2015. The global palm oil market was about 65 billion American dollars. In 2021, that's estimated to reach almost 92 billion American dollars.
Wow. That's crazy.
In 6 years. So it's a 30-something% growth. I would say, and I'm going to mention this at the end of the podcast, palm oil, it's a huge, huge concern because forests are just being zapped out of existence in that part of the world for palm oil. There's 2 apps. I'm just going to mention it here at the beginning of the podcast. Is for us in North America, the United States, the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo has the palm oil app. For our friends in New Zealand, Australia, there's Palm Oil Investigations, or POI, P-O-I app. I don't know what they have in Europe. I couldn't find it. But, these apps or anything that has RSPO palm oil on it means it's sustainable. Now, that's a whole different discussion for a whole different day, because something like the Orangutan Foundation International is like, I don't care about these apps. There's nothing sustainable about palm oil. We have to stop using it because it's come at a cost of a huge loss of biodiversity in Asia. So they want to end all palm oil, which, we'll see. But, that's what's going on in the, bringing it back to King Cobra, their habitat. I didn't realize it was that bad. I knew it was, like, especially with Asian elephants.
Sure.
But I didn't realize how quickly they were losing their forest, and it was actually more than the Amazon. Like, I thought the Amazon was the worst. It's not even close.
Right. Well, that's why people can choose to either not use palm oil or at least go for the sustainable palm oils, you being a good consumer using these apps and voting with your dollar and showing the people with the big money that we don't want palm oil that comes at a high cost of losing the incredible rates of biodiversity. So there has to be a happy medium somewhere, and that can start by basically bothering people's bottom line. So
I know.
That's how you get things done, as we're learning in this day and age. So,
well, it's one way. I mean, it's one way people can help conservation,
right, from their couch.
It's like,
absolutely.
I'm not going to,
that should be the series. The next series we start couch conservation.
I know.
We're all stuck at home right now.
Yes, people aren't going to go vegan or vegetarian, without a choice, and not expect people to do that. You can use some of these things and say, you know what, I'm not going to buy that product, and I'll tell the company why. This isn't sustainable. Or I'm not going to buy bottled water, plastic. That's when we do notion species. I mean, there's things that we can do, and companies are taking notice. They are absolutely taking notice. They absolutely are. So, I mean, this is a huge, important reptile across Asia, Angie. I mean, it's huge.
Oh, yeah.
And they're critical to the ecosystem. I mean, absolutely critical.
I mean, they're an apex predator, and we'll talk a lot about their nutrition and what they eat, but they eat a lot, and they have a big role, and they have a few predators, but not too many. And so without them, talk about having a lot more snakes or a lot more rodents or some potential unwanted pests. They would be, without the king cobra, they would be there. And so their ecosystem role and where they fall in the food web or food chain is high up there. And study after study shows that when you pull apex predators out of a food web, it has a very, very catastrophic effect on not just one or two species, but on several. So it is important that even if you're not a fan of snakes or even less of a fan of venomous snakes, is they play a huge role and they're really, really important.
Yeah. And these ones are vulnerable. We didn't even mention that yet. Like their population's decreasing and, they're definitely, they're
their
in trouble.
population's in decline and the IUCN lists them as vulnerable. And we looked around for population counts. And of course, there's not a specific number as much as Chris and I like numbers, but we do know their population is declining, and especially depending on which region they're in. But on a positive note is when we're looking at the economic importance for humans, there's several reasons to rejoice in them. First and foremost, because they're so big and so impressive and stunning to look at and have these cool behaviors, they're really one of the most attractive highlights or exhibits at accredited zoos and or nature centers. So people love seeing them and wanting to learn more about them. And they're just a highly revered species of snake. And that's just looking at from more of a modern point of view. When you go back historically from the region where this snake is found, the king cobra is an iconic or prominent symbol in mythology, in folk traditions and storytellings, in India, in Sri Lanka, in Myanmar. So it's actually even the native reptile in India. So it's similar to our bald eagle, right? It's like loved and adorned, and there's just been, just so much. I don't have time unfortunately, to get into all the mythology and folk traditions today, but it's really a symbolic species. And so I think that we need to do our part to help save it, right? And the forest that it lives in. And then if you're more of a biomedical person, or if you still haven't convinced your family members or friends why we should save king cobras, interestingly enough, their venom is yielded a whole bunch of pain relievers, such as Cobraxin and also Nyloxin.
Cobraxin, I love it. I love it. Cobraxin.
Yeah, I know. Cobraxin and Nyloxin, which can be used for severe arthritis pain. And I'm sure a lot of people out there have a family member that might be, potentially is suffering from arthritis pain. And so learning a lot about them from a physiological or biomedical point of view can be really important for human medicine. So I think that it's really important when you have a species that's so loved and adorned by many people in many cultures, but then also potentially not liked or feared because it's a venomous snake. It has this kind of polarizing point of view. I think it's really important to focus on the positive, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, yeah. Wait till we get some of the behaviors Angie's going to talk about. It's amazing. So looking at their evolution, it's very interesting. Overall, since it's been so long since we've covered a snake, there's over 3,600 species of snake, or serpentines. Is the order. There's 20 families within that, 520 genera. And then you have all these species, which are just huge. So if you wanted to do a podcast just on snakes, there you go. 3,600 plus you could do.
Good. Our work, snake. We've got our work cut out for us, Chris.
Yeah.
Job security,
them
buddy.
And birds. Yeah. Them and birds. So, when you get to this, not true. Okay. So they're part of the family Elapidae. Which is the family of venomous snakes. These are the tropical ones that we see in not only Asia, where we are now, but in the Americas, Africa, Australia, or even Pacific, the islands and things like that. And these are called elapids. So the true cobras are part of this elapid family, but they're a different genus. So they're the genus of Naja. And that is the true cobra family, which is 38 species. That's from Africa to Asia. And we could even go back to, you and I were kind of laughing before we got going. Honey badger, episode 10, that eat cobras, but not king cobras, right? Like they go after the true cobras. Now, the king cobra is not, because they're their own genus, which is Ophiophagous hannah. Now, overall evolution for snakes, the best guess in science is that, we even went back, reptiles came before dinosaurs.
Right.
175 million years ago. The best guess is that snakes came from lizards, but there's other competing theories. Was it like a worm type aquatic creature or whatever? The first snake, now this is cool. The first snake that we found is in southern England about 170 million years ago, and it's Eophis underwoodi, and it's like the earliest fossil of a snake.
That's so cool. In England.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Of all the places in the world. Now, most modern snakes, the diversity really didn't emerge until the end of the age of the dinosaurs. So when dinosaurs went extinct, then snakes kind of exploded and diversified. The first elapids, or venomous snake, the first venomous snake was actually an elapid, which is what we're talking about, cobras, about 25 million years ago in Africa. So, and that's when I think the first evidence of fangs, these.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk a little bit about fang physiology with that. So, and that gave rise to eventually the king cobra in India. We don't have any specifics on like when exactly they emerged.
Okay.
But, they've been around for a couple million years. But obviously snakes have been around for a long, long time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Long time. Yeah. Okay. Now, we have talked about the largest snake ever, which was cool. I don't know if you remember that. Remember we had it at the Florida Museum when I was there a long time ago. I love that story.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah. Remember? There was a student that found it.
Yeah, from Florida. He was a grad student. Yeah, his
I don't remember the name, though.
Down. Okay, so his professor, it's to give people the cliff notes. His professor was down in Colombia looking for giant crocodile bones, and there was like a mine, and so he was shipping back bones. And the grad student, like this would be like me and Angie. This was like right when me and you were like grad student professor back then.
Yeah,
and he was unwrapping the fossils, looking at them, and he like went by, and the student said, "That looks like a snake fossil." And he's like, "You're right." So he looked it up, and it was the backbone of a giant boa, which eventually gave rise to Titanoboa.
That was the name, Titana.
Right, yeah. Like 60-something feet long and enormous. And I remember there was a special on National Geographic about it. And at the exhibits, this is so dorky, the exhibit at the museum there in Florida, and I'm watching it, and the grad student's on.
Oh, yeah.
And then I look left, and he's standing right next to me, and I look right, and he's on TV, and I look left, and I was like, oh my God, how cool. It was so a dorky moment for me.
I love it.
The largest venomous snake, this is cool.
Uh-oh.
Okay, 4 million years ago from Greece, and this is Leophis crotaloides. I think crotaloides, because everything's like Archimedes or something in there. So Leophis crotaloides was only about 13 feet long. Okay, so not quite as long as our king cobra, but weighed almost 3 times the weight, up to 57, 60 pounds, 26 kilograms.
That's a fatty. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, it was like a viper. It was just like a huge viper type snake. And that's the largest venomous snake ever. But luckily died out about 4 million years ago. So you'll never run into it.
That's probably not a bad. It was still probably more scared of us than we would be of them, but still. Yeah.
Yeah. 60-pound, 13-foot snake. Oh my God, I would die. Like, oh. But you don't know. Who knows in Florida, Geez, you guys got
Burmese pythons.
Yeah, there you go. Burmese pythons.
They are. Yeah, they get big.
They're big. All right. Now, the king cobras, this is surprising. On average, 20 years, which is pretty long.
I know, Chris.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's so many surprises in this podcast. I thought that was incredible. Just goes to show like how well adapted they are to surviving as an apex predator in in Asia where they live. And I just, it's awesome.
Now, one of the things, we got to definitely get another herpetologist on here, because looking at their physiology, I just had to dive, and I didn't get too much into the details, but when you do look at their anatomy,
Mm-hmm.
they do basically have the similar organs, like, mammals, animals, other reptiles, but it's just long, in that compact body. So their lungs, this was kind of interesting. The two lobes, like most animals, like, or two lungs, like the right and left lung.
Mm-hmm.
In snakes, the left lung is like a vestibule. Usually the right lung is the one that they use to breathe, and the left one in most species isn't really functional.
Okay.
So, I couldn't find anything specific on King Cobra if it was or not, but I'm sure it's probably pretty similar. So, they predominantly only have like one lung that works most of the time. And then the left isn't as functional, but they have big livers, they have stomachs, small intestines, large intestines, the gonads, male, female, depending on that, adrenal glands, kidneys. So, a thymus, the thyroid glands,
Sure. Yeah.
Brains. I mean,
Heart, all of
basically
it.
this,
Yeah. As you
yeah,
say,
the heart pumping.
that's
Yeah.
that's always why I've loved anatomy and physiology, because I think,
Yeah.
of course, from species to species, there's unique functions and unique physiology. But yeah, the general, especially when you're looking at vertebrates, it's a lot of a lot of similarities,
Yeah.
and they have a lot, a lot to teach us about our own bodies and our own physiology. So yeah, no, it's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, similar function.
Mhm.
Stomach. They eat. It goes
Oh
to the
yeah. Oh,
stomach.
they
Acid
poop.
breaks down the protein. Yeah,
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 yeah.
they poop. Yeah, they do.
Yeah, oh yeah. Snake poop is super stinky.
Oh,
But luckily
yeah,
they
no
don't.
thanks.
When you're taking care of them, they don't poop every day. So there's that.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And then okay, so King Cobra eyesight it's actually better than most snakes.
Right. I was reading that they
Yeah,
could see a moving person like 100 meters away, which
yeah.
seemed
Hmm.
pretty
Hmm.
incredible to me.
So
And good night vision, even though we'll talk about too, they usually are a little bit more hunt during the day. But yeah, they can see at night.
hmm. And then Angie, I remember going back to our snake episodes. The tongue, the forked tongue,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
so chemoreception. So like the left fork, the right fork, they will slither and stick that tongue out, and depending on where the molecules were stronger, that will orient them in to where they want to go, or where their prey is. Right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
snakes, king cobras are no different. They have an excellent sense of smell. And as you said, in general, the way they do this is almost through tasting. So snakes have developed this highly specialized organ called a Jacob's organ, and makes them basically be able to taste and smell the air. And the Jacob's organ is going to be found at the base of a snake's nasal cavity, and it has two ducts that reach down into the roof of the snake's mouth. And so they use that tongue at the flicking vibration to, yeah, basically gauge the location of its prey. And it can also help it sense vibrations and movement. And yeah, it's just really, really incredible. It's a whole, almost like it's not really a sixth sense. It's kind of like a
Mm-hmm.
combination of our two senses, or of our taste and our smell. So yeah, really, really cool adaptation to help them be able to locate their prey.
Yeah. It's almost like a superhero power. You think about it.
Totally. Yes. Totally
Yeah.
superhero
Yeah.
power.
Now, I talked about their fangs, and the
Mm-hmm.
fangs are like a hypodermic needle where they inject venom.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what we do know about king cobras, their venom is not the most potent, because I'll just say because they're not from Australia. You have to be from
Good old
Australia to
Taipan.
have
Yeah.
the most. You have to be. Yeah, everything. You have to be from Australia to be the world's deadliest animal. You
Yeah.
just have to be. Everything in Australia will kill you.
It's like in Australia, it's like go big or go home. Like we're the biggest,
Yes.
baddest, the
Oh,
best.
they are with everything, with
Yeah.
everything. Yeah. So most of, and I've covered this in the previous pod, but the taipan is the deadliest toxin of any snake, and from Australia. Then you have the sea snakes. Then you go to the brown snake, Australia. Then you go back to the sea snakes, which is tropical oceans, probably Pacific near Australia. anywhere near Australia. Then you go to another sea snake that's kind of near Taiwan, but probably near Coral Sea, near Australia. Then coastal taipan, which is Australia. Then the crate. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You get away from Australia.
And where's the
that's
crate
up in
from?
China, Taiwan,
Okay.
Vietnam. Okay. But then a bunch, the tiger snake, Australia. So Australia, kill you. But
the King Cobra does win something about its venom.
It injects like the most.
Right. Volume.
Makes them, that's what makes them so deadly.
Size does matter. Absolutely.
It does matter with them, yes. So up to 7 milliliters or 1.5 teaspoons?
That's a lot.
That's a lot of venom. That's a lot. Enough to kill 20 people or an elephant. Poor little elephant.
Yes.
What I did find interesting about this is they're in an evolutionary arms race with their prey. That was when I was looking up evolution, this kept popping up and I was like, whoa, this is kind of interesting. So I kind of went down this rabbit hole a little bit. And, again, the cobra's shy. It doesn't want to attack people or animals or anything unless it's either protecting its eggs or hunting or it's cornered. But these proteins, like they've gone and looked at all these proteins that make up the venom.
Yeah, I was such a dork. I was like actually reading the different names of the proteins.
Yes, I knew you would. You biochem.
Yeah.
But I thought the whole thing that they sequenced it and it's actually constantly evolving. Yeah, it's crazy. So it just turns out that the venom was just created from proteins that had other functions in the body that they happen to congregate in the venom. And as they've used it on their prey, and prey have become more immune to it, they've had to survive or evolve. So a different snake that had different venom was more successful. So they bred and their genes got carried on. So anyways, I thought it was fascinating without, going too much into all the proteins and stuff, but just that they were this evolutionary arms race.
That's exactly and I think I was, I guess, pleasantly surprised it wasn't just one interference protein blocking this receptor, that there's actually a cascade of several proteins and or enzymes that attack the body in multiple strategies, if you will, more or less. And depending on the snake, different venoms are going to do different things to an animal or a human's body. So most vipers, for example, they're going to target the circulatory system and they destroy red blood cells. But the venom from the King Cobra basically stops or hinders or slows down communication between nerve cells. And so, which has to do a lot with acetylcholine receptors and things like that. And so when your nerves aren't able to communicate, you can have extreme dizziness, blurred vision, and then most importantly, paralysis. So it's just a different tactics, different strategies as far as how they're basically, disrupting our cellular activity. And but the good news is of course that if there are antivenoms that are specifically for King Cobra bites that can, as long as they're administered, usually within 30 minutes of a bite, that they can undo a lot of the damage that a bite can potentially do. So, that's...
And it's rare, right? I mean, it's rare.
Oh, yeah.
It's extremely rare, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's super rare. In fact, I found it super fascinating that it's a lot, the King Cobra is a lot more cautious than smaller snakes. And as you mentioned, it's usually only going to attack or bite people if it's cornered or in self-defense. We'll talk a little bit about some of its breeding and brooding behaviors. But throughout its range in Indonesia and India, the King Cobra causes fewer than 5 human deaths a year, which is about 1/5 as many caused by rattlesnakes in North America.
Which we know is still low,
which is super really low. Rare. Yeah, I mean, so it's and then an interesting statistic in Thailand is most king cobra bites are from snake charmers, which still are very, very small, right? And so
Right.
we're
Yeah.
talking about really, really, really small numbers. I mean, it's
And
but
there's a couple billion people that live in that area and their whole range, right? I mean, it's
right, exactly.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's not up there as one of the higher causes of human deaths as far as animals. I mean, we all know dog bites and
Mosquito.
mosquitoes and and bee stings and all sorts of things. So
Yeah.
they don't.
Yeah.
That's the thing is there's a lot of myth behind them being these killing machines or something like that. Yes, they do have potent venom. We know that, and their venom can kill you. But in the same instance, that's not. It's just the probability
It's rare.
is pretty low.
So I do know of one animal, and we've kind of already talked about this, but that is kind of immune to it, right?
Yeah,
That hunts them or may kill them.
Yeah, well, some of us have probably heard of the mongoose called Rikki Tikki Tavi, which was known by the author Kipling's book, The Jungle Book, to basically, attack cobras. And so that is to expand on that. There's definitely truth to it. The Indian gray mongoose, which we haven't covered mongoose, that'll be a fun one we'll do sometime because really, really cool creature. But the Indian gray mongoose is known to fight and or kill venomous snakes, and then in particular cobras. So there's several ways that they're able to do this. Number one is they're very agile, so they can move around the snake pretty quickly, and they have really thick coats, so it's going to probably blunt some of the penetrating venom. But so typically the venom will bind to the acetylcholine, those receptors I mentioned, and the nervous system of their victim. Well, researchers have found that the mongoose, certain species of mongoose, are able to block this venom from binding to their acetylcholine receptors. So therefore, the cascade of basically imperialysis doesn't happen as much. It's almost like the venom heads into their brain receptors and bounces off, for a lack of scientific explanation.
Yes.
Which I prefer. Even as a scientist, I prefer a lack of scientific explanation sometimes. So, but yeah, and because of that, it's almost like they are immune to it, but they technically are not immune to it. So, to be immune to something basically means that none of it can affect you.
There's no effect.
Yeah, there's no effect. And that's not true with the mongoose. I mean, they can definitely handle small amounts of snake venom, but if they get a huge load of it, or they get bitten many times, or too much volume or too much potency, it can overwhelm their system and they might die. But yes, in general, they can take down a cobra. So
wow,
I just find that, and when you talk about this evolutionary arms race, that is somewhat of what's going on, right? As far as they get stronger, the cobras their venom needs to get stronger. Back and forth, vice versa type deal.
Yeah, it just reminds me of honey badger. I mean, honey badger doesn't care. He just sleeps it off, or she sleeps it off, But you're right. They probably, if they get too much of it, they may not sleep it off.
Right.
Right. So it's not like they're immune to it. They're just kind of resistant to it.
Yeah, they have definitely some resistance, some alterations of the receptors.
Right.
And so, which is once again cool, really cool biomedical technology that potentially is worth exploring further.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, Angie did say, earlier the hood. So that's what they're known for, the iconic Cobra hood.
Yes, let's talk about the hood. This was so fun learning and reading about it this week.
Yeah, and probably some, it'd be good. We'll cover nutrition quickly, but, leading into behavior. So when threatened, this is what, the hood is. It's a warning device. Like, hey, look at me. Not only am I bigger because now I've got this hood that makes me look bigger, but hey, I'm a cobra. You don't want to mess with me. I've got venom. So what happens is it's loose skin around their neck, and when excited or threatened, so what they do is they have movable ribs that when it inflates, it extends the ribs up and spreads the hood. Mm-hmm. So then they're like, boom. they take, pull in air and those lungs expand and now they're up and they're looking around and they've got this big hood and they're like, you don't want to mess with me. And I'm like, no, I don't want to mess with you. I don't want to mess with you. I know what you are. Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of what it is. It's just so iconic. I mean, for snakes, it's just the most iconic thing in the snake world. I think it's just one of the most that and the rattle. I mean, what else more?
Sure.
There's snakes do a lot of cool stuff, but those two things are
those warning
so
signals
iconic.
are pretty prominent. Like they mean business. And I think with a rattle, it's that noise. It's like, uh-oh. But with a king cobra or cobras in general, that's that upright stance of getting, lifting their upper chest or whatever, and then having their head and neck becomes so much bigger, and it's quite beautiful. That hood is really is stunning.
Yeah, it's impressive. It's impressive
to watch on videos.
Yeah, I know, exactly, or from a very safe distance.
Yeah.
So AJ, this was surprising too, because usually you think venomous snakes eat like rats, mice,
sure.
and rodents, and other things. Maybe frogs. The king cobra, their diet is other snakes. I mean, that's what they want to eat, is other cold-blooded animals.
That's what they're going for.
Snakes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I didn't know that going into the podcast. And it's so interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I know there's snakes that, that they do hunt other snakes. I mean, that's what they do. I didn't know cobras did. And, generally it's not venomous snakes they go after. They go over rat snakes or pythons up to 10 feet in length. Pythons, but they could go for some other venomous things like Indian cobras, which is a true cobra, the crates, which we just talked about, or even smaller king cobras. So they'll do a little of that too. But I just thought that was crazy. Now, they have been seen eating eggs and lizards and maybe small mammals every now and then, but primarily a diet of snake.
Yeah. In the wild for sure. I know under human care they will consume rodents. But and that I think that's obviously the only way that I've really seen or known about them before. And so I thought it was super interesting to learn that they love to eat these other snakes, and some of them are venomous themselves. And so and that's where and then it all started to make sense reading about they're an apex predator. They really have this big group of taxon that they eat, and the populations that they help keep under control. And so just really, really fascinating.
Yeah And they're only predators, again, mongoose, but mongoose don't actively really look for them.
I don't think that's not what they're trying to go for.
But large birds of prey may catch them, and especially the smaller ones. And then humans really their number one predator, that knocks them out. But I know they've got some fun behaviors. There's some fun stuff in there. So,
they do. You can probably see me cheesing on the video chat now. No, it's like, once again, it's just a real fun species. But in general, king cobras are mainly active during the day, which once again is a behavior that kind of separates them from true cobras, and that true cobras are usually a bit more active during dusk and dawn. And so, that's when they'll definitely do a lot of their hunting. And although they have been seen doing a little hunting at night, so probably depends on the exact habitat and location where the cobra is living. And as Chris previously mentioned, that yes, they have been recorded climbing, and they're known to be hanging out in trees, which is probably a place where you wouldn't really look for them. So you want to keep your eyes and ears open, which you should always do when you're hiking in the wild, right? But they typically do their hunting on the ground, on the forest floor. So, but there have been studies that shown with tracking devices of them going 65 feet up into the canopy. So pretty crazy. And then, and once again, too, some of these tracking studies have shown that they will swim short distances. So, not that they're typically found in the water or anything like that, but they definitely don't shy away from it if they need to go from point A to point B. And in general, once again, they have kind of this notorious reputation of, they're a big, long, venomous snake, but they really are shy. I don't think I can really stress it enough on this podcast that they will avoid humans at all costs. And even when they are cornered or confronted, they're not going to necessarily attack, right? That's when a lot of times they'll show the behavior of, getting up off the ground
The
a
hood,
little
yeah.
bit and opening up their hood and hissing or growling as we open some of those vocalizations. So, they would prefer to escape. And so if they have a place to escape to, they probably will. But if they're cornered, then that's when they might be, they might feel that they need to strike. I mean, humans don't look like a snake. We're very far from
No,
it. We have
no.
arms and things like that. So,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
legs. So they're not going to accidentally mistake us for a food item. So if anything, it's more out of fear. And they once again, they're like snakes in the grass. They're more scared of you than you are of them.
I like that.
Yeah. And then with vocalizations, we opened with the growl. And I just think that is really, really incredible. So what they do is the sound, of course, is used to intimidate. They're warning you. They're not inviting you to come mess with them. They're
No.
saying, please don't mess with me. I don't really want to bite you. And so what they'll do is if they feel threatened, they'll take a deep breath of air and then rapidly exhale. And basically that forces this burst of air through an organ called the tracheal diverticula in the respiratory tract. And it kind of acts as our vocal box. It's like a resonating chamber. And certain scientists basically have compared this sound to an angry dog or a German shepherd or a growl. And it is a little bit more intense than your standard hiss that you might have heard before from a snake, or even over here in North America, the rattle from a rattlesnake it's a sound you don't want to hear, but it's not necessarily a scary sound like that growl that I opened up with. So, and regarding social behavior, they're pretty, they pretty much keep to themselves unless they are breeding. And we'll talk about that here in a second. But I did find an amazing video on YouTube. Thank you, YouTube, of male king cobras that were actually wrestling. And yes, I watched all 5 minutes of it. It was it was actually like a really nice snake wrestling match. I don't know if that's a fair way to describe it, but it's a ritual. And so, but a lot of times they're doing this basically to win breeding rights to a female during breeding season. And basically they're upright and they're just wrestling more almost like neck wrestling, if you will. And the goal, researchers think, is to push the one who basically pushes the other one's head to the ground, kind of like a thumb wrestling match, right? Like
thumb wrestling, that is.
Yeah.
No blood and guts, but thumb wrestling.
If you push it down, like you get the other head down to the ground, you win. And what's super fascinating is there's no biting involved, right? Even though King Cobra snakes are largely immune to their own venom, which is why, as you mentioned, Chris, they will sometimes eat smaller cobra snakes as part of their diet. Yeah. But yeah, there's no biting. It's very fair wrestling. And I guess the stronger, probably the evolutionary reason for this is the stronger one ends up winning, and therefore the female gets the genetic bonus of the stronger male. And so, yeah, it was a cool video that I was able to watch them engage in this unique breeding behavior. And so whoever, pins the other one down, head down to the ground, wins the right to breed the female. And once the male and female king cobras breed, the female will lay her eggs after about 50 to 59 days, depending on what region she lives in. And she will lay about 7 to 43 eggs. So a wide range.
Wow.
I don't know if that depends on diet or size or age. I couldn't really find the research about that. And then, Chris, the king cobra eggs will incubate for about 66 to 105 days. Okay. But I need to focus on this incubation phase because it's highly unique in the snake species. So king cobras are the only species of snake in the world that actually build a nest mound to protect, incubate, and basically ferociously guard their eggs. Okay.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So most other species of snakes are going to lay their eggs in burrows or under rocks or logs or in some leaf litter. But King Cobra builds an actual mound, like builds up of vegetation, leaves, leaf litter, sticks, things like that, that she collects, okay? She builds this nest from dead vegetation and then has the ability to understand which vegetation works better to build nest chambers. So in the wild, it's been reported that these female king cobra snakes construct a 2-chambered nest. Okay. So the eggs are deposited in the lower chamber while the female will reside in the upper chamber, getting her sun and enjoying herself, and then also guarding the behavior.
Wow. Okay.
And she's guarding these eggs from predators, right? Because there's rat snakes, and there's a lot of things will steal and eat eggs if possible.
Yeah, reptiles. Yeah.
And so even more fascinating, okay, is that there's reports that the male king cobra is not a completely deadbeat daddy snake. Okay.
Okay.
There's reports that the male will stick somewhat nearby and also become aggressive during the brooding period. Now, it's highly documented that the female that's when she's going to be more aggressive.
Right.
Okay. So
right.
she's shy. She builds this big old nest mound that no other snake species does with 2 chambers. She is going to guard those eggs.
Defend
and so that those hormones kick in, and then she's going to be more willing to strike than she would at another time. So I mean, I guess the moral of the story is to stay away from king cobra.
Don't mess with
I mean, but that's any mama. Any mama
I know
is like that. So
no, cassowary.
Yeah, that's true. There's definitely some different ones out there.
The one in the world.
Yeah, the one in the world.
Plays the egg and walks off.
Yeah.
It's like what?
So now, and once again, the male behavior, there needs to be a little bit more supporting evidence because some of the literature is a little dated as far as I think it's like 1946 and 1957, where it's been suggested that the male king cobras will participate in this nest guarding behavior. But there's been some conflicting reports. But still, I mean, it's just really unique in the snake world. And I know that there's really cool studies going on in Arizona here in North America about the diamondback rattlesnakes and how they are finding that there is more and more parental care of juvenile rattlesnakes than ever thought before. So it's just good to keep in mind that these species deserve to be saved and conserved and studied because we still have a lot more to learn about them. And they just, I mean, this behavior that the king cobras do is fascinating.
Yeah. It's a snake.
It's a snake, and it's building its cute little nest, and it has the ability to make it have the architecture for it has 2 chambers, and I think of like nest building and with like orangutans and a lot of these bird species. So no, it's just quite incredible. And once again, it was another reason why this pod. I just got so excited this week. I couldn't wait to share this information with everyone.
Yeah, I mean, animals, they just amaze us every week.
Yeah. And just for those that live in Southeast Asia, just so you know, the breeding season usually occurs in January through April. And so that's when they're going to breed, and then the female will lay the eggs. And so the nest building and guarding behavior is usually during the late spring and the summer, with hatchlings happening in the fall. So if you're out hiking in the woods in the summer months, that's when you're just going to, be careful that you're not, look where you're stepping and walk slowly and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Now, and Chris, when these baby king cobras are born, guess how big they are?
So if they get up to 18 feet, foot. Maybe?
Oh my gosh,
that's
you're
pretty
so
big.
good. Yeah.
That's pretty big though.
Yeah, you should go buy a lottery ticket. Yeah, no, exactly.
Okay,
Yep, they're just about a foot long, and then they have the alternating white, yellow, and black bands that run the length of their bodies, and they're really quite striking. They're really, the bands are much more prominent than in adults. And once again, depending on where the species is from, when they grow up, they'll lose a lot of these chevrons or these bands when they're fully grown, and they might almost be somewhat solid brown or olive green in color, except for in Myanmar, those adult king snakes are ones that typically remain a little bit more banded.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. And, it's like we kind of talked a little bit about losing biodiversity in that area of the world. So, their populations are decreasing as we lose, land mass. I mean, it's like, people, always want to keep animals in the wild, but geez, there's no wild left. It's disappearing. So that's where it's just like we need to keep looking at these biomes. And that's such a critical piece of conservation. So overall, vulnerable, looking at the data from IUCN, because this is really the best data we have. In Vietnam, they have estimated that the species there of king cobras has declined by more than 80%. Not only habitat loss, but they're hunted, not only for like meat, but for like leather, things like that. In India, where, again, they're kind of revered, 30% reduction. In China, they think they're pretty much gone. I mean, there might be some left, but not many, because again, exploited for all things medicine. Again, here we go, grinding up, snake scale or whatever. I don't know. And when they actually do have medicinal value, but just not the way the Chinese are using it, or these markets are using it, these wet markets, which have been in the news the last couple of months, which we've got to eradicate those. But anyways, overall, decreasing, vulnerable to, it's a species heading towards extinction, and we need to keep our eyes on them, and in that area of the world as we keep covering more and more species from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that it's important to note that there are protections for the king cobra. Like in Vietnam, they are protected. And for instance, in India, too, the government is trying to work hard to try to stop some of the illegal wildlife trade, as you mentioned, for body parts and things like that. So people are paying attention to it. But this week, one of the organizations that I found, I was so happy to find it, dedicated to king cobras, is the King Cobra Conservancy. And they can be found at www.thekingcobra.org. And also, they have a presence on Facebook and just a beautiful website. So please go check them out. And Chris will put the King Cobra Conservancy on our show notes. And the mission of the King Cobra Conservancy is to basically support research and conservation initiatives, learning about the status of the king cobra in the wild. They want to identify threats, which a lot of course is land loss and humans, but they really focus in on solutions for their survival. And they do this by having a whole board of really, really talented people that are some of the foremost experts in the world on snakes. So, I mean, there's researchers on there that study their behavior, their ecology, the habitats. So, a lot of brilliant minds, which was so cool to see all these really, really smart people working together for the King Cobra Conservancy. And they've done a lot of research. For instance, they studied the ecology and conservation status of the king cobra in South India, and they've released reports that help the governments be able to potentially provide more protection to them and understand what's happening there. They do a lot with education. So they'll work on video projects that help reduce basically human king cobra conflict, right? And so they'll release these education videos and show them in schools and things like that to get people to understand more about the really important role that king cobras play, and that they're not super scary and bad. And you and I both know, looking at the research data across several species in several countries, it keeps showing time and time again that if you really want to protect a species, you have to get the local communities on board.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Loving that species, wanting to conserve that species. So a huge shout out to the King Cobra Conservation. They are just working, like I said, internationally, locally, and in fact, in 2016, they were able to rescue and relocate 108 king cobras.
Oh, wow.
So that's
okay.
another like service
Yeah.
and thing that they provide. So
That's good.
yeah, so definitely like them
Yeah.
on Facebook and check out more of what they're doing. And
Yeah.
it gives me hope when when we opened on the pod about how there's, people really care about the King Cobra. I mean,
Yeah.
and that always makes me really happy to learn about that. And I want to share that with our listeners.
Yeah, there's always, almost every species
Except
has,
what like the
somebody
hippo
fighting. Hippo?
and
What was something we did recently?
know,
It
what
was,
was it?
what was it what we did recently? Raccoon dogs.
Yeah. Well, they don't really need
Raccoon dogs.
their numbers aren't too low.
No. I'm starting the raccoon dogs. You guys are doing the hippos.
I'm definitely on board with the hippo, team hippo over here.
Yeah. So, okay, just to end, conservation tip of the week, again, use those palm oil apps and I'm going to put some of that info in the show notes in there, a little bit more on palm oil. You can look it up. Just to finish though, while, we talked about snake charming, King Cobra is the species of choice for snake charmers in Asia. And the interesting thing is they can't hear, but they're deaf to ambient noise, so they can't hear the flute. So the idea is they respond to the movements of the charmer. So as they bob back and forth, the snake bobs back and forth. So they're following it. And then I did read, generally they do this during the day. They're like you said, it's very rare for them to strike. But during the day, their strikes are less accurate than, say, dusk or dawn. And sometimes the snakes are just trained not to strike, whether it's through negative reinforcement or
Positive
things
punishment,
like that.
stuff like that.
Punishment, yeah, that they don't strike. So they learn that. Sadly, and I read this was rare, but some do either defang them or will sew their mouths shut. But that usually results in the death of the snake. So it's rare to see that, but it can happen, But overall, I mean, I know, we talked about like in some parts of the world, they're very revered. These are like pets, snake charming is part of the culture. And, so it's interesting. It's interesting stuff to read about.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Kudos to you, Mom. People don't know this, but, Angie, like most parents in the world right now, dealing with kids by herself while John's at work. Good job, Angie. Good job today. I had to give you a shout out because I'm sitting here thinking about all the parents in the world. I got my 2 boys. You're doing a great job with your 2 boys.
Yes,
good job getting work done today with the 2 kids. You might even be able to hear my
boys in the background. Boys, come here. Do you want to say hi really quick? Let's hear your snake noises. Come here really quick. Come on into the microphone. No, you got to do it in the microphone so that everybody can hear it.
Bok, bok, bagar.
That's a chicken noise. Let's hear your snake noise, Dad.
Bok, bok, bagar.
That's a different snake. I've never met that snake before. What about us? Let's hear a snake hiss.
There you go.
And there.
All
there
right.
goes
Good
some
job,
spit into
boys.
my microphone. All right.
All right, Mom. You did a great job today, and thank you. And we will carve out some time to talk about the next species next week.
Thank you, everyone, for listening and loving and serving and sharing this podcast. We appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Listen, learn, share. Join the movement at allcreaturespod.com.